Hey everybody, Mark, DoctorDeadwax's here, back for day 33 of the inbox challenge. Sun Dodger won. Gary, he picked the numbers today. Gary picked 4 numbers, and we're going to do all 4 records. No beer review today or anything like that, just having a glass of Taylor Fladgate. It's fall here. Ontario pears are in. Some nice Oka from Quebec, Hungarian chibai sausage, and a nice chewy baguette. Just perfect snack. Anyway, on to the records. First record is Dixie Flyers, light, medium, and heavy. Dixie Flyers are a Canadian bluegrass band, and they have been together since like 1971 or something, or 1974. This is on Boot Records. And that is not, there it is, now it's in focus. This is on Boot Records. Boot Records is the label started by Stompin' Tom Connors to release his own records on. And here you go. There's the label. And what's interesting about this record is, well, this record fills 2 of my obsessions. I collect a couple things that both have to do with this record, because, you know, typically I'm not a huge Canadian bluegrass fan, but one of the things I'm totally obsessed with is Willie P. Bennett. Willie P. Bennett is a vocalist and a harmonica player who played bluegrass and also played like blues sometimes in Canada. And he put out several of his own albums, and he played on several Dixie Flyer albums, and he played on lots of other people's albums. So one of the things I collect is the things that Willie P. Nelson played on. Now, Willie P. Nelson inspired Colin Linden, Colin Fury, and some other guy. I mean, I know all these guys' names, but just totally blanking right now. But inspired them to form like this Canadian supergroup almost called Blackie and the Rodeo Kings. And the first record that Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, or Bark, did was a cover album of Willie P. Bennett songs, because Willie P. Bennett had a record out called Blackie and the Rodeo King. So, and they loved Willie P. Bennett. So they did this kind of tribute album. Now, the other thing that I'm totally obsessed with that is on this record is it is engineered by Bob Lanois and recorded at the Grant Studios, Hamilton, Ontario. Grant Studios is blocks from my house. Grant Avenue Studios was a studio owned by Bob and Danny Lanois. Daniel Lanois, you might know him by. U2, I think, recorded a record there, most famously. Just because they're local, I'm interested, and I collect anything that Bob or Danny Lanois produced, engineered, mastered. And they did a lot of work out of Grant Studios, but before that they had a studio in the basement of their parents' house in Ancaster, and they recorded a lot of records there, a lot of like little private press records, and I collect those too. So this record kind of scratches several itches, and of course the Boot Record Stompin' Tom is kind of cool. Now, as bluegrass goes, this is a good bluegrass record. These guys are considered great bluegrass players. They've played in the States a lot. They've been invited to bluegrass festivals around the world. They took over running a bluegrass festival in Manitoba, or no, Woodstock, Ontario. So if you like bluegrass and you see Dixie Flyers records, I recommend that you check them out. And if they have Willie P. Bennett on them, I definitely recommend that you check them out. The next record was one I was very excited to find. This was Caravan, Better by Far. This is an original UK pressing, and this record, you know, this record is in very nice condition. It's, well, solid VG+, which is better than 98% of the records you've seen me show, which are usually just beat-to-shit pieces of, well, you saw that Moon yesterday. This is on the UK Arista label. Black label, blue A. What's interesting about... Oh, sorry. What was interesting in the Deadwax on the Dixie Flyers is even though that record was produced for like Grant Avenue Studios and it was released on Boot Records, it has the capital C in the Deadwax, which is the little circle with another circle and the other circle and the line through it, so it looks like the letter C. It's that kind of like target symbol. I've shown it a few times. Like I've shown the shown what it looks like on an actual album. That's in the Deadwax on both sides. So that means that record was probably either mastered by Capitol or manufactured by Capitol. And I thought that was a little bit, you know, that was a little unusual for something on Boot Records that came out of a little private studio. So this one here, this Caravan record, it has a, you can see it there at 4 o'clock. It has the lyre for Utopia. It doesn't have Utopia spelled out with a lyre, it just has the lyre symbol for Utopia. And this has interesting Deadwax. On side 1 it says hello dear, D-E-R-E, and on side 2 it says filing cabinets. I found this, well, I found the Dixie Flyers in a thrift for $2. I found this Caravan Better by Far in a dollar bin at a show last year, and man, was I was over the moon to find a Caravan record for $1 in a show, in a dollar bin at a show. And this pristine, not a tick on the whole thing, UK pressing, the whole deal. And today I played it. Dear Caravan, what happened? If I could do it all over, again, I'd do it all over you. What happened between there and the land and the pink and all of that and this? This is terrible. This is such a sad record. I mean, it's got moments. The Last Unicorn is probably the best song on this record. It's instrumental. It has a great start. Then it kind of goes into a keyboardy, jazzy, fusiony kind of finish. But it's actually, you know, it's the best song on the record. Man in a Car is okay on side 2, and Nightmare on side 2 is okay. But wow, is this just a mediocre pop record with some bad ballads and poppy, schmaltzy? I mean, the good songs are actually pretty good and would, you know, if the whole album was like The Last Unicorn or maybe Nightmare, then the record would be, you know, a half-decent record. But with just those two, this record is so bad. I don't know. This is not Canterbury. If this is Canterbury, I never want to hear Canterbury again. So now I know why it was $1 in perfect condition, a UK pressing at a show. Because, wow. Mediocrity, thy name is Caravan, better by far. Next up we have CANO, Eclipse. CANO are a Canadian band. They're a French-Canadian band, but they're not a Quebec-Canadian band. They're a Franco-Ontarian band. They're from Northern Ontario as opposed to the French people from Quebec. And Northern Ontario has a high concentration of French people. This band started in the 1970s, French-speaking people. And around that time, it was estimated in their region the population that spoke French was almost 50%. I have no idea if those numbers are at all representative of what it's like there now 40 years later. But the primary person in this band was André Pama, and CANO started as the Coopérative des Artistes du Nouvel Ontario in Sudbury, Ontario. And they're known in English as the Artist Cooperative of Northern Ontario, but it's kind of funny how the Nouvelle Ontario became Northern Ontario, because Nouvelle Ontario actually means New Ontario. And what they were was they were kind of like a commune. They started on a farm. They were all like this cooperative of artists that were like writing plays and creating works of like tangible fine art and creating music. And the new Ontario was this kind of concept that they wanted to document and encourage and sustain the francophone part of the of that region of Ontario, and they wanted to you know, ensure the survival of that culture up there. So that was the original goal. So this kind of commune thing that only lasted like a summer basically, but the cooperative continued, and in Sudbury it became two things. It became TNO and CANO, Theatre of Northern Ontario, and the artist, or the Cooperative Artists of Northern Ontario, which is this, which was the band. And Andre Paimon kind of did things in both areas. He wrote plays and he did music, and excuse me, they kind of still almost exist, and lots of things that they started up there are still going strong. So they were highly successful as an organization, I would have to say, because they've had a long-term effect on culture and society in the northern part of Ontario. So Andre Paimon had committed suicide before this record was recorded, so the lyrics on this record were written by him, but the music on this record wasn't by him. But the rest of the band continued on, and they made this record. Now, CANO are sometimes compared to Harmonium, but they're not the same. They have prog moments. Definitely, they're proggy at times, but they're also traditional French folk at times, and they're also folk rock at times, and they're also almost pop ballad at times. They have a series of personalities, which is basically kind of representative of all the personalities of the members of the band. Everybody kind of had their own moments and their own input into music and their own input in the lyrics, and so that represents everything. This is their third record, I believe. This song is the first. This one is the first one that has some songs in French. This one had a little bit of chart play. They did another record after this. After that, another member of the band died, and they released a record under a different name. They released a record by a band called Mask, which was actually CANO, and that record was called Camouflage. And they thought maybe it was time to reinvent themselves, and they were with A&M, and A&M were supportive. But then they went back to CANO and they released another record. Some people that have been in CANO, Ben Mink, who replaced Nash the Slash in the Canadian prog band FM when Nash went back to FM. Ben Mink joined this band, not for this record, but for one of their later records. Interestingly, another musician that was in this band from the very beginning was a fellow named David Burt, and he joined a band called basically he joined a band called Merriweather. Now, Merriweather was a band from Toronto that was made up of guys who had played in Bruce Coburn's band and had left the Bruce Coburn's band to start their own band. They'd gone down to California. David Burt joined them, went down to California. They released some records as Merriweather. They were signed to Capitol with Steve Miller at the time, like they were kind of close with Steve Miller. They were kind of like a psych band, I think. And then subsequently, a couple of the guys left Merriweather, and they formed Salt and Pepper with Rick James, and they released a record or maybe two with Rick James. And then I can't remember if it was Andre Paimon or somebody else. He went down to California and spoke with David Burt and convinced him to come back up to Canada in, I think, 1972 or 73 to help create this Coopérative des Artistes de Nouvelle Ontario. So he left California and came up and was in CANO for their for the rest of his career. So that's a little background and information on that. This is on this is just on the standard A&M label at the time with the white background and the gold A&M. This has JAMF in the Deadwax's, which stands for Just Another Mastering Facility out of Toronto. We've talked about them. They do excellent work. Some Rush records, most notably. Some of the best pressings of a couple of Rush records are JAMFs. And this is everything. This is a little bit proggy at times. This is English. This is French. This is folky. This has ballad moments. It has slightly new age moments. It's all over the map, which is what CANO is. And finally, we have Jan Garbarek, Eventyr with Nana Vasconcelos and John Abercrombie. We all know Jan Garbarek. We all know John Abercrombie. Nano Vasconcelos was in Cadona with one of my favorites, Colin Walcott. And this is another one of these early 80s promo records on ECM that came up from the States as opposed to being made here. You know, anytime I show you an ECM label, it's going to look like this basically. The promos were no longer white label. What's interesting about this record is it has the WM or WW marking that I talked about before, which indicates that this was made in Wakefield, Arizona. And the record I talked about that on was the Gallery record that was just absolutely fantastic. So I'm pretty certain that this Wakefield plant was actually pressing records on Qui-X vinyl at the time. Because these records are just absolutely dead quiet. And one of the interesting things is these Wakefield pressings are see-through. So if you hold them up to the light, you can see light through them. See? So that's a good way if you're in a shop and you see an ECM record and you can't see the WM and the Deadwax's because maybe it's too small or your eyesight doesn't show you, you can hold this up to the light, and if you can see like a brownish, if you can see through it and it has a brownish to reddish tinge, that would be indicative of that. And this is 1200. The Gallery was ECM 1206, I think it was. So, look for these around that number range of ECM releases. Musically, this is your pretty standard Garbarek record. He's very much the contemporary jazz sound that's slightly free at times and slightly new age at times. This isn't very free. It's a little wonky at times. This is not as good as Gallery, but this is quite interesting. This has 56 minutes worth of music on the record, which is quite stunning because there's still this much Deadwax's on one side. And these ones from this period also come with a little booklet of promoting some other releases. So that's another thing to look for. I'd recommend this record. I go by Gallery first, but Garbarek is always interesting. If at least for a lot of people, he is. So this is a good record, and CANO is. It's hard to recommend this record because it's so, one song here would really appeal to somebody who likes French Canadian prog, but one song here would really appeal to somebody who likes folk rock, and one song here would really appeal to somebody who likes slightly new agey ballady stuff. So it's really hard to recommend it, but it's good. Caravan, better by far. Find another Caravan writer, please. And record, and Dixie Flyers if you like bluegrass, by all means. So Gary, thanks for picking the numbers. Thanks for playing along. Have a great day, everybody. Keep the record spinning.